Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. Today we'll be going through the second half of the Ratana Sutta. Yesterday morning we went through the first half, so today we'll go through the rest of it. As before, I'll be going through it section by section and talking about the significance of the various verses, as well as an explanation of some of the Pāli terms where relevant. And you're welcome to type in questions at any time, and I'll take all the questions at the end. So we can start with paying homage to the Buddhas. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So we had gone through the first 9 verses yesterday. So now we'll start with verse 10 of the Ratana Sutta. And I'll put the link in the comments section if anyone wants to follow along with a translation of the text. We had just gone through a couple of verses on stream enterers in particular. So now we're going into verse 10, which is another on the subject of stream entry. So verse 10, the translation here says, "One who has attained vision will inevitably discard 3 things: belief in self-existence, skepticism, and habitual practices." So this is, again, a description of a stream enterer. So one who has attained vision, in Pali, that's dasana sampada. So dasana means one who is, literally dasana means seeing. So it's one who has clearly seen the Four Noble Truths, who clearly knows for themselves the basic truth of what the Buddha was talking about. And also someone who has had their first glimpse of Nibbana, their first glimpse of the Absolute. The standard definition of a stream enterer is someone who has purified their mind of 3 obstructive fetters. So those 3 are sakkaya ditthi, which is translated here as belief in self-existence. So sakkaya ditthi, it's a compound word. So the final word is ditthi, which means a viewpoint or a belief or an opinion. And sakkaya, there's different ways of explaining this term. The literal etymology of the word sakkaya means own body. But the applied meaning of this is whatever we identify as ourselves, whatever we see as being our own body, but also our own mind. So elsewhere in the suttas, this is defined as identifying as any of the 5 khandhas. So not just the body. The body is only one of the 5 khandhas. The other 4 are aspects of the mind. So sakkaya ditthi then is having any kind of self-identity based upon some specific component of body or mind, or all the components taken together as a whole. That would also be an example of sakkaya ditthi. So a stream enterer has recognized that they are not this body, and they are not any specific part of this mind. But a stream enterer still has a underlying concept of me. They still have an underlying feeling of self-existence, an underlying feeling I exist as a separate individual. That still persists, but it's not connected to any specific object or any specific experience. So one of the similes that the Buddha uses in the suttas is he says it's like if you have dirty laundry. So dirty laundry here represents the mind of an unawakened person. And then you wash the laundry, but then even after washing the laundry, although it's clean, there's still a slight odor that persists in the clothes. So the clothes are clean, but there's still a slight odor. And it's only after you store the clothing properly with in a fragrant casket for a period of time that persistent unpleasant odor fades away from the clothing entirely. So he says, in the same way, the dirt and the stains on the clothing is like an ordinary person's self-identity. So thinking, I am this body, I am these emotions, I am these thoughts, I am these perceptions, I am these beliefs, I am this consciousness, I am this awareness. That's the usual dirt and stains on the mind of an ordinary being. So a stream enterer has washed all of that away, but there still remains this subtle stench of self, the subtle stench of self-belief. So that's like that subtle odor that persists in one's clothing after washing it. And it's only when one becomes an arhat that subtle stench of self fades away entirely. So the next term here is vicikiccha, and in this text it's vicikicchita, which is a very slight distinction. It's more of a grammatical detail, but it doesn't change the meaning of the word. So vicikiccha and vicikicchita, if you want to be precise, vicikicchita is the abstraction of vicikiccha. So vicikiccha means skepticism or doubt. And adding the suffix ta onto a word usually makes it into the quality of that, similar to adding the suffix ness onto something. So wet means wet. Wetness means the quality of being wet. So vicikiccha is doubt or skepticism. Vicikicchita is the quality of being filled with doubt, or the quality of being skeptical, the aspect of skepticalness or doubtfulness. So a slight distinction, but one which is, unless one is translating texts, this distinction is mostly irrelevant. So this in particular refers to skepticism about the truth of the Buddha's teachings. So even someone who has very strong faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, if they haven't yet become a stream enterer, then that faith is subject to impermanence like everything else. That faith can wane, it can diminish, it can even disappear entirely. It is possible that one can get sidetracked or confused or lost in wrong view. And one's faith then can diminish. And so skepticism about the Buddha's teachings is coming because until we've clearly seen for ourselves some glimpse of the absolute, there can still be this persistent background doubt in the mind of maybe the Buddha's wrong. There can still be that persisting in one's subconscious mind. So it's only when one clearly sees for oneself what the Buddha was talking about that those seeds of doubt evaporate entirely. And the third quality, so it's in the suttas, it's usually silabata paramasa. So paramasa means grabbing something. It means clinging to something, holding on to something. And it often has the particular implication of a misgrasp of something, a misunderstanding of something. Though it's also used in some places just in a more ordinary sense of meaning holding on to something. So silabata, sila, normally we think of the word sila as meaning morality, and that's one use of the word, but it also has the meaning of habit. And it's used in this way in many places in the suttas. And the word vata, so vata means any kind of religious practice or ceremonial vow or anything of that sort. So silabata is then habitual practice. It's a religious practice that one habitually engages in. So an example of this from the time of the Buddha was there was the practice of ritual bathing. There was a belief in some forms of Brahmanism that one could wash away one's bad karma through bathing in cold water 3 times a day. And there are suttas where the Buddha refutes this. There's also a lovely poem in the Therigatha where one of the enlightened bhikkhunis points out the absurdity of this belief. But nonetheless, there were countless people at that time, and actually even to this day, this practice persists in some forms of Hinduism. This practice of ritual bathing and the belief that just washing your body in cold water will somehow wash away your bad karma as well. So habitually engaging in that kind of religious practice, believing that it's going to purify your mind, this is a symptom of being delusional. It's a symptom of an unawakened mind. So when one comes to understand the Buddha's teachings, one recognizes that it's only through practicing morality, samadhi, and wisdom that one is able to purify the mind. That doing things like bathing 3 times a day or going around acting like a dog, that was another religious practice which was sometimes practiced in ancient India and again is actually still practiced to this day in some forms of Hinduism. Or the practice of going around naked, even in the winter time. Again, these are practices which don't actually bring any spiritual benefit. And if one commits to such practices, believing that they will bring awakening, then that kind of wrong view will actually obstruct one from making progress on the path. So it's important to point out, though, that silabbata, so habitual religious practices, silabbata are not inherently bad, but rather it's when we misunderstand them, it's when we use them incorrectly that they're an obstacle to our practice. So elsewhere in the suttas, the Buddha also refers to a stream enterer as someone who is silabbata sampanna. So sampanna means perfected. So a stream enterer is someone who has perfected their spiritual practices, perfected their habitual religious practices. So not somebody who has rejected religious practices entirely, but rather someone who understands the value and proper application of such practices. This is an important distinction. Enlightened beings might still bow to Buddha statues and offer incense on a shrine and follow all manner of rules of conduct. But their mind is free from silabbata paramasa. So they don't have this misunderstanding, this delusional grasp of habitual religious practices, but rather they have a deep understanding of the value and place of properly applied practices, of how practices can be a support for the development of the mind, but are not a replacement for the development of the mind. So this is an important distinction. So then this continues. So in the way the source text I'm looking at here divides this up, next is verse 11. But this is a bit strange because it's actually 10 and 11 are one continuous verse. So next it says, they are freed from the 4 kinds of downfall, and it is impossible for them to do any of the 6 terrible things. This is the magnificent jewel called the Sangha. By this truth may there be well-being. So here, again, this is talking about some of the characteristics of a stream enterer. So a stream enterer is said to be freed from the lower realms, in that they cannot be reborn in any of the miserable states of being, which are subhuman. So in the suttas, there's actually only 3 planes of downfall that are mentioned. So the hell realms, so nirya, the realms of unimaginable suffering, unimaginable anguish and torment. So the Buddha, in some places, he goes into some metaphorical descriptions of just how terribly awful it is in the deep hell realms. But elsewhere in the suttas, he also says that it's you can't really understand how awful it is. It's just the most unimaginable torment. So that's the lowest of the realms, the hell realms. And there's layers of the hell realms. So the very lowest layer of the hell realms is unbelievably bad. But then there's several layers which are still unpleasant, but progressively less unpleasant. Then the next level up from that is the Peta realm, so the realm of ghosts. So these are semi-incorporeal beings which inhabit the same plane of existence that humans do. And some people can see them. And the ghosts are characterized by an unquenchable thirst, an unending hunger and unquenchable thirst. So they're constantly experiencing the torment of not being able to satisfy their basic needs. And then the third of the lower realms is the animal realm. So this is when one is getting close to human existence, but the animal world is still characterized by fear, by overpowering instincts and impulses. It's characterized by confusion, by a fundamental delusion, which runs through the mind of animals. So it's not desirable to be reborn as an animal either. And in the suttas, that's the end. Then the next is the human realm. And then above the human realm, you have the various heaven realms, the various forms of deva existence. So one of the things which marks the Ratana Sutta as being part of the later historical strata of the suttas is that instead of talking about 3 lower realms, it talks about 4. It mentions 4 lower realms. So what happened here is that at some point in the early development of Buddhist history, the asuras, which throughout almost all of the suttas are classified as devas and therefore as a positive rebirth, at some point they got reclassified as a lower rebirth. So there's only a couple places in the entire Sutta Pitaka where asuras are referred to as a lower rebirth. And both of them are texts which are, again, they carry the hallmarks of having been edited or modified sometime after the Buddha's passing. So again, just keeping that in mind throughout the vast majority of the suttas, there's only 3 lower realms, and the asuras are classified as a positive rebirth. They're a variety of deva. They're not a lower rebirth. For the record, by the way, if one goes by the old sutta counting, then you have exactly 30 realms of existence divided into 3 sets of 10, which is very much the Buddha style. The Buddha style was to do things in these very neat, systematic, mathematically precise ways. Adding in the asura realm breaks the symmetry, which I find a bit disappointing. So I'm inclined to go with, again, the 30 realm system, which we see all throughout the suttas, and which doesn't create a new realm just for asuras. It also clearly states in the suttas that asuras live either in the human realm or in the deva realms. So again, I don't know why the commentaries went and invented a new realm just for asuras. It seems unnecessary. Minor point. So they're freed from the 4 kinds of downfall, and it's impossible for them to do any of the 6 terrible things. So the 6 terrible things, these are the 6 worst things that you can do. So these are to maliciously injure a Buddha, to murder an arhat, to murder your mother, to murder your father. Let's see. Injure a Buddha, kill an arhat, kill your mother, kill your father, intentionally cause a schism in a unified monastic sangha, and to sexually assault a bhikkhuni. So these are the 6 things that you absolutely should not ever do. These are 6 things which are incredibly bad karma, incredibly strong bad karma, and which usually result in an immediate rebirth in a hell realm. So they're not to be done. So one of the characteristics of a stream enterer is that they will never deliberately do any of those 6 things. They might sometimes do minor bad karmas. They might sometimes do minor unwholesome acts, but they won't do anything major, and they certainly won't do any of the 6 extreme acts. So then verse 12, this again is going on with talking about the qualities of a stream enterer. So it says, even if they perform a harmful deed with body, speech, or mind, it is impossible for them to conceal it. This is said to be impossible for one who has attained right view. So this is, again, it's talking about a stream enterer. A stream enterer in the suttas and in several places, it's mentioned that if they do make some error, if they do commit some minor wrong deed, some minor bad karma, then they'll go to their teacher or to a trusted fellow practitioner and they'll admit what they've done. It's like, oh, I screwed up. I did something unwholesome. And they might ask for advice, like, how can I work on this problem? How can I reduce this? So one of the characteristics of a stream enterer is that they are completely dedicated to Buddhist training. They're completely dedicated to receiving training in Buddhist practice. So there's no desire to conceal their flaws. Instead, they openly reveal their flaws to their teachers so that they can get help in overcoming those flaws. So contrast this to most people, most ordinary people. They don't want other people to know about their flaws and failings. They want to present the best possible face, the best possible public impression. A stream enterer is not concerned with saving face. A stream enterer is concerned with eliminating their defilements. And if you want to eliminate your defilements, it helps a lot if your teacher knows what your weak spots are, so they can help you strengthen them. Then the next verse, so this is verse 13 by the Pāli text I'm using. So this is going back to talking about the dhamma. So we just had a series of verses about stream enterers. So now it's talking about the dhamma again. It says, like a forest grove in full bloom during the first month of summer is the excellent dhamma that he taught, which leads to enlightenment, the paramount benefit. So this is, it's creating a metaphor of the Dhamma as being like a forest grove in full bloom during the first month of summer. So if you've ever been in a beautiful forest in late spring, early summer, then you can relate to the image that's being given here. So this lush, beautiful experience. So that's what it's like. The Dhamma is this vast, lush forest of knowledge and practice, which helps to bring about the highest benefit, which is the attainment of awakening. And so this is talking about the Buddha. This next verse, it says, the excellent one who knows what is excellent, gives what is excellent, brings what is excellent, taught the unsurpassed excellent Dhamma. So this is just a few short praises to the Buddha. So pointing out that the Buddha himself is the highest being, the most excellent sentient being, the supreme being. Supreme not in the sense of omnipotence, because in Buddhism, no one is omnipotent. But supreme in the sense that he's completely purified his mind and clearly understood the true nature of reality. So attained the unshakable realization of absolute truth. And next, there's a final verse which is about an arhat, or a Buddha, so someone who's attained full awakening. It says, they have eliminated the old and do not produce the new. Minds free of lust for future existence. They have eliminated the seeds and have no interest in their growth. The steadfast ones extinguish them, just like a lamp. So this is talking about how a fully awakened being no longer has any interest in self-existence. They no longer have any interest in creating another personal, individual experience within samsara. So it says, mind's free of lust for future existence. In other words, since there's no longer any attachment to me or mine, there's no longer even a concept of me or mine, then there's also no longer any wish to persist within samsara. There's a recognition that everything within samsara is dukkha. Everything within samsara is just a manifestation of personal suffering. And that any form of existence, no matter how pleasant and refined, is still marked by dukkha. So there's no interest. There's no interest in experiencing dukkha. A fully awakened being recognizes that dukkha is completely optional. And so naturally, they take the option of no dukkha, the option of infinite, unconditional, unlimited happiness. It's actually not a difficult choice. And then the sutta ends with 3 short verses of, again, homage to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So it says, whatever beings are gathered here, whether on the earth or in the sky, the Tathagata is honored by devas and humans. We bow to the Buddha, may there be well-being. Then the next one, same. We bow to the Dhamma. And the third one, we bow to the Sangha. So that's the end of this discourse. So we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And at this time, I'll take any questions that you might have. So first off, hello to all the people who are joining in. So hello to Maria, Gita, John, Amaranta, Jayanta, Yankee, Atui, Kumu, Sud, Charles Lee, Michael, Melissa, Robin, and Patricia. Welcome to all of you. And let's see if there's any questions. So I see a question here from Gita. Gita asks, is clinging to wrong practices in this, is this referring to fire worshipping and sacrificing of animals? Yeah, those are 2 good examples. No matter how much time you spend worshipping fire, you will not get 1 step closer to awakening. So the practice of fire worship was actually extremely popular at the time of the Buddha, and continues to be popular even to this day in some spiritual traditions. But fire worship doesn't get you 1 step closer to awakening. Doesn't do you any good in that regard. And sacrificing of animals, the Buddha actually clearly states, is not only does that not help you attain awakening, it actually does the opposite. It generates a lot of bad karma, which will bring you away from enlightenment. Actually, the worst kind of bad karma is to do bad karma in the belief that you're creating good karma. So to do evil deeds, believing that they're good deeds, that's even worse. If you do an evil deed knowing that it's an evil deed, then at least you have some degree of wisdom going on. But if you do an evil deed thinking that it's good, then that's doubly bad, because you're compounding bad karma with wrong view, and performing actions based upon wrong view. So definitely animal sacrifice is something which is completely forbidden in Buddhism. It's seen as unequivocally evil, unequivocally harmful, not to be done. And it says, are there wrong practices that a Buddhist practitioner might do? Oh yes, countless. Buddhist practitioners can do all kinds of wrong practices. But most of the Buddhist ceremony that you'll encounter in Buddhist temples is not in the category of clinging to wrong practices, as long as you do it with the right attitude. So, for example, if you're offering incense to the Buddha, if you think by lighting a stick of incense and putting it in front of a statue, I will attain awakening, that's wrong view. But if you're thinking of the wonderful qualities of the Buddha and of your deep respect and admiration for Buddhas, and you're offering incense, keeping in mind the symbolism of incense. So the fragrance of the incense represents the fragrance of virtue, of sila. The burning tip, so the single pointed tip on the incense represents the unification of mind and samadhi. And the light represents wisdom. So there's a symbolism to incense. It's not just a little burning stick that magically produces awakening, but rather it's a reminder of the threefold training. So if you have these kinds of thoughts in mind, then the ceremonial act, although it looks the same from the outside, it's very different on the inside. It's very different in terms of how it affects your mind. So most common Buddhist ritual practices are actually perfectly fine as long as you do them with a proper understanding of what they are and what they're for. And understanding that it's only through training and developing the mind that you attain awakening. That ritual practices in and of themselves do not produce awakening, but that if done with the proper mindset, they can be a support to training the mind. Charles Lee asks, is it possible that we mistake some demigods and or hungry ghosts for human beings? I'm thinking sociopaths like autocratic dictators, serial killers, beings who will do anything for money or fame. So it is possible for devas to take the form of humans, to appear as humans and to interact with the human world. Most of them don't bother. They're not really interested in us. We're pretty unappealing to them. We're these like stinky, weak little things, which in rotting bodies, and they're just like, why would we want to hang out with those things? Some of them take an interest in human beings, and some of them will even masquerade as human beings for periods of time. Whether they would go to the point of becoming autocratic dictators, probably not. I mean, if I was a deva, I don't know about you, but I'd be too busy hanging out at the parties up in the heaven realms. Like, why would you want to rule this vile little planet when you can hang out in the heaven realms? It's a pretty bad second choice. As for hungry ghosts, as far as I'm aware, do not have the ability to appear as humans. So you don't need to worry about them. And yeah, it's possible for malicious devas to come and interfere in human affairs, and sometimes they do. But mostly they don't bother. They don't waste their time with us. Yeah, they're not interested. I mean, when you see awful things being done by humans, usually that's just awful things being done by humans. It usually is just exactly what it looks like on the surface. Bhavani asks, what is meant by realization of absolute truth? So that's awakening to the true nature of reality. So clearly, directly seeing nibbana. That's what that means. Sud asks, how do practices like Buddhanusati, Metta, Maranasati, and 32 parts of the body meditations help in eliminating defilements? Or do they merely suppress them? So Buddhanusati is recollecting the Buddha, the qualities of awakened beings. So that helps in reminding us of what we're capable of and what we can aim at, reminds us of the qualities to develop in mind. It also helps to develop happiness and confidence, which are useful prerequisites for realization. Metta, its main function is to purify the mind of aversion, which again is one of the major defilements, major obstacles. And it also helps to develop samadhi, which is one of the requisites for awakening. Maranasati is mainly to give us a sense of urgency, so we don't get lazy in our practice. So it helps remind us to keep up our energy, to keep practicing diligently. And it's also a way of eliminating our fear of death, interestingly. So recollecting death, you come to accept that it's just part of nature. So your fear of death can fade. 32 parts of the body meditation. So seeing the true nature of the body helps to drop one's lust, which again is one of the major obstacles to the path. So these practices, they do help in eliminating defilements, because they can help us to develop the wisdom of seeing what our defilements are, and to counteract them by cultivating the wholesome opposites of those defilements. So usually in the Theravada tradition, these particular practices are not said to themselves result in complete awakening, but rather that they're extraordinarily helpful in developing the necessary preliminary qualities of mind that make deep realization possible. And Sud further says, can someone get to stream entry by these practices? If it results in eliminating identification with the 5 khandhas, dropping one's doubt about Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and recognizing that religious practices in and of themselves don't lead to awakening, then yeah, it's possible. Annie asks, what can we say to people who think that bowing, chanting, and showing gratitude to the Buddha is doing rites and rituals? I think I already addressed that pretty clearly. Again, the act of bowing can be a way of recollecting the Buddha and cultivating a sense of respect and reverence for the Buddha, building up one's faith and joy, similar to Buddhanusati practice. So these are all useful ways of training the mind. Chanting, again, can be a way of developing wholesome mind states, as well as a recollection of the Dhamma. Gratitude to the Buddha is actually a critical element of Buddhist practice, which is mentioned in countless places in the suttas. So usually people who reject these practices are people who think that Buddhism means meditation. And to people like that, I say, well, you need to spend more time in traditional temples, and you need to do more bowing and chanting, because clearly they don't understand the value of these practices. And unfortunately, if somebody's really set in their view that bowing and chanting and so on is not useful, then it's very difficult to break them out of that view. If that's their belief, if that's their opinion, then there's actually not much you can do to convince them otherwise. Yeah, I mean, all you can do is actually, one thing you can do is to point out the effects. Most of the practitioners I know who have this kind of hostility towards Buddhist ritual and insist on only doing meditation and nothing else, they're usually really unpleasant, unhappy people. Whereas most of the traditional Buddhists I know who practice bowing and chanting and a certain amount of ritual, as well as doing meditation practice, most of them are very happy and calm and peaceful and joyful people. So there's a difference there, isn't there? So ultimately it's about the effects, the results. Robin asks, is there any Buddhist mission higher secondary school? I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. That's the last question from online. Anything from the residents here? No? Okay. You had a question?
Well, I was just speaking of the conversation, rites and rituals, I know some people there's a belief that the Puritas don't have the power that they do. And I wonder if you would speak to that, just the powers of Puritas, the power of the Ratana chant.
Well, ultimately, these things have the power that we give them. So that's the easiest way to understand it. So I mean, just to give a very simple example, if you're coming back to metta practice, if you're just sitting there repeating, may everyone be happy, but you actually don't mean it, then it doesn't have any effect, does it? Actually, it can. It can still, over a long period of time, have a small effect. But generally speaking, it's not going to have much result. On the other hand, if you're repeating, may everyone be happy, and you're using that as a reminder to bring up that genuine mind state of benevolence and compassion and goodwill, then that's useful. So it's exactly the same with parittas. If you're just chanting the paritta because, okay, now it's time to do that long, weird chanting of meaningless syllables, then that's all it's going to be for you. It's just going to be a string of meaningless syllables. But if you're doing it with a genuine wish for the well-being and benefit of the people involved, then that has power, that has potency. So it's about your intention, your attitude. So remember, karma is intention. It's your attitude and meaning behind what you do. So give meaning to what you're doing, and it has meaning. Also, as I mentioned, the parittas also tend to draw the attention of devas, and particularly the dharma protecting devas. So that also has a potency of its own.
Thank you, Bhante.
So Michael asks, would you say that any Buddhist ritual we choose done mindfully is good practice? I mean, generally speaking, doing things mindfully is always a good idea. But yeah, if you do Buddhist rituals with the right attitude, as I mentioned earlier, then that's supportive to one's practice. He goes on, how about any ritual, eating, Catholic reflection, for example, on the Holy Mother done mindfully? I can't comment on Catholic rituals because I'm not Catholic and I don't know much about Catholic ritual. But generally speaking, I'm what Ayasoma calls religiously monogamous. So I'm pretty solidly, exclusively Buddhist. So I can't really say anything about Catholicism. I do know that there are some people who find ways to integrate Buddhism and Catholicism in their life. I'm just not one of them, so I can't really comment on that. Anything else?
You mentioned like the inner meanings of like the incense, like lighting incense. Is there like a meaning behind like lighting candles or like flowers? I know it's there sometimes like
So the incense itself carries the meaning of sila, samadhi, and panya. But also if you're doing candles, flowers, and incense, then the flower represents sila, the incense represents samadhi, and the light of the candle represents panya. So if you're doing the three offerings, then each one separately is sila, samadhi, panya. If you're just offering incense, then incense itself is all three.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What about like offering food to Buddha?
I've heard that explained in several different ways. One of the simple ways of explaining it is that, again, you're showing your deep respect and gratitude towards the Buddha. As monastics in particular, it's good for us to reflect that we are able to eat because the Buddha created a system which makes it possible for us to eat. Like we have alms food because the Buddha created a system that makes it possible for us to have alms food. So making a food offering to the Buddha is a way of showing our deep gratitude and appreciation for the fact that he made this life possible for us. It's also this idea of always putting the Buddha first. So before eating, one offers food to the Buddha, not because you're expecting him to eat it, because he probably won't. But rather, it's a reminder that the Buddha always comes first. So the Buddha should always come first in your mind. So doing an action, a physical action of putting the Buddha first, is a way of reminding you to always put the Buddha first in your mind as well. And the act of eating in particular can be a real breeding ground for defilement. So it tends to be a lot of greed and carelessness comes up when we're eating. So starting with offering food to the Buddha is a way of making the act of eating a sacred act, a spiritual practice, rather than just a mindless greed fest. Okay.
And it goes with like tea or water. Like that goes in the same category.
Yeah, in some monasteries, actually, they'll do tea offerings to the Buddha. Yeah, that's in the same category. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Robin asks, how do we attain nirvana? By practicing morality, concentration, and wisdom. By following the Noble Eightfold Path. This is the way. So that's the end of the questions. So we can go ahead and end the session at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.